Yes.
Okay, no issues. So, yeah, yesterday we were in URL, so which is uniform resource link, right? So we are just about to learn the components or different components of the URL which we have, right? So in this, right, let's split this into these things, right? So this will be like this. Normally, what we say, and this will be the same. So this part of URL is called as a protocol. So this is something where you know what protocol you are actually using. Sometimes you would have seen HTTP, you would have seen HTTPS, maybe you would have seen FTP, right? Basically, you'll see FTP when you mostly when you are using in when you are actually working in a company and you have access to your network drive and the server to which you are actually uploading the files, right? There you have your access to FTP, right? So, but this part of story is called as a protocol. This will say that what protocol you are actually using to access it, and this is your server name, right? So this is your server name, or we can actually say that this is your IP, right? If you guys have done in real time, you can also access this using your IP like this. You can also say something like 198 some 23.56.1 something. You can also substitute this using your IP. I'll show you in my PC. I'll show you through IP, right? Because yeah, it is true that I do have every machine will have its own host name. I can use that, but I cannot use www because it is something where you have to register your host name with your web, but it is not possible in our local case, right? So it will be mostly I'll show you using my IP, or as I said, I can also use something called localhost, right? Localhost is nothing but the mapping which is done to my local IP, right? So that is localhost. So this is something which is a server name you are actually touching upon, right? Now here you have a port. Now you would have never seen this one, but yes, what do we use this is sometimes. See, by default, if the server's IP is 18, which is 80, right, then you don't have to mention this, because by default, if you don't give any port, right, so if you just mention your server, then it will take 80. Just in case, if you are giving some other port for your web application, then you have to mention your port. We will be actually working on this. How can we define a port, and how can we give a local host and a port, right? Because we'll be touching upon the maximum possible things so that you can understand the minimum requirements of your browsing of your web application. So this part is the port, right? This part is the port. Now here, from this part, the actual thing starts. Now till this part, it is like, you have given your address and you have given your door number, right? So it is something, it's a protocol. I mean, where he'll be coming by van, or he'll be coming by some protocol to travel till this address. It is nothing but a protocol, driving protocol. And always HTTP is a direct connection protocol, which is connection oriented protocol, and it completely works on TCP IP. Fine. So now let us check out this part. So this part is something which is a physical path in your server, which means whatever pages, whatever servers, whatever files, whatever JSPs, whatever actions you create, or whatever strut XMLs, right, or whatever Hibernate objects, or all the classes, right? Creation JSPs which are connected to strut, which are web XML which is connected to strut XML, everything. All these things are called as a raw files which you have created. Everything will be placing on some folder. So that's why we just have two components here. You can have two components, or you can directly call this. There is no issue in that, right? If you are actually placing something directly, what is this directly and what is inside the folder, I'll show you that, right? So here basically you have two components, which is directory right? And we have these things, which is raw files, or we also call it as some file names, right? The file names which you want to expose to the outside world, right? File names, the actual file names. And here the directory can be a single or anything. Let us say nodes, you can say JSPs, some hyphen. So this is completely directory. This is a normal directory which we have, right? So this is a complete URL. You won't get anything else on this. But yes, I hope you would have seen something like a URL, right? It's something like this. Let us say this is our URL. For obviously google.com, there is no port, because each and every server, not only for google.com, check out any server, you won't be getting this part. Why? Because by default they'll be having their servers and they'll give you 80 port to be connected by default. Even if you are actually buying some space from network guys, they'll actually create a separate VM space for you, where they'll create a 80 port and it will be dedicated to your website. That's why we can't see any port, because this is something which is cumbersome, right? You can't give this to anyone. You can't just say google.com and colon port. No one will remember this, right? This may change again. What is the beauty is, just give something, just go to google.com, or let us say if you have your own website, just go to freenode.com and just browse on. I mean, in that, it's very simple to say. That's why we maintain 80, or if there is more than one web application or more than one web server which you want to implant. It happens mostly internal to the organization, right? They can't maintain different servers for different web applications, right? If a one project contains some 4 web applications, they can't maintain different different servers or different boxes, right? That's why what they'll do is they'll go for port level configuration of servers, right? That is how it works. So here, if you have seen this thing, so this is a complete URL. What you would have seen is there will be a question mark and something will be written, some J session ID, right? Or J session is equal to something, or you would have seen something like ampersand, something, right? So these are called as a query strings. Right? You'll never see URL out of this complete package, right? So this part is something which will be designed, which your Tomcat will be helping out to browse on, and this part is something which you have to design, right? Where we'll be learning servlets, JSPs and all, where you'll understand how to do this. And anyways, in the same topics, we'll be learning how to create a query string, and what is a query string, what do you use this and all, right? And this and all, right? So that is your complete URL part, right? Yeah. So if it's a straightforward thing, but yes, it is very important to know the split of URL, right? Because while designing web, you should understand where exactly you are actually going to place your JSPs or servlets, right? It's a very important task there, right? But obviously not only JSPs and tasks. So let us say you are actually designing a simple strut page, right? Let us say you are designing some action in your strut. Obviously, you should design your directory and go for something like, if you don't have index, maybe you have something called index.action. There is something where you have designed your strut. Even for that, obviously you have to follow this, because struts is nothing but your web application plus your struts 1. Right? Struts 1 is something where action class used to be there, and you'll understand this when you go to that, but this is common for everything. Right? So even the query string, you'll be getting everything. So, but that's what, like, if you understand a big part of servlets and JSPs clearly, the frameworks will be very easy enough to learn. Okay. So that is your URL part, and that is all about your networking. What you will be getting most probably in across our this one, right? So yeah, let's go to the next one, which yesterday we were talking about something called socket, server socket. I said I'll be creating some simple socket and we'll create a server, right? Let us see how to create that. Now I have opened my 2 Eclipse instances. If you can see, these 2 are different workspaces as such, right? Because using one Eclipse I can't run two programs at a time, right? I can't do that. So that's why I've opened my tool. I've created two different workspaces. You can see here this workspace is something else. I've just taken Mesh tool something, and this is something. This workspace will be using for Pro application. I've created new workspace, so whenever I'm going to copy the code part, right, I'll be copying in a brand new workspace parts, right, so that you won't be confused with the old ones, right, which you have already seen this, right. So now first let us create a server here, right. You have to create server. You have to choose one of the workspace to create server, because I want to run two different programs at a time. Why at a time is I want to run a server, keep it open, right. The server is something which will be waiting for some client, and its client is something whenever client wants he can access the server. That's how it goes, right. So but it is not a vice versa way. Your client cannot wait until the server starts, right. If your client is not open, then what happens? You may get some errors like 4040 error and all. So anyways, we learn these things when we go to the servers part, not to worry, right. Yeah. So let us create a server here. Now it's again a simple Java project again, and we are not if you would have understood this, right, we were not talking about any web thing here unless we have understood something called URL. But here till here what we were talking about the whole thing. Anyways, we have understood some web application parts, but here socket and datagram things are something which we are going to learn over the TCP IP in a same machine, right, and not over the web, right. So for that, if you are not going for the web application, which means our Java project is more than enough, right, because we don't need any web APIs to support all. Let me take it next here. Yeah. So now let me make it as something for network server. Right. I'm just making it as network server, and then yeah, Zula.
Sorry to disturb. Are we recording the session?
Yeah, I'm recording my session. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I did receive that.
Yeah.
Just want to finish.
No, sister. Let me finish this up. Now this is my very simple server. Now what I'll do, I'll just create a class here. Let me call it as server. There are few things which we'll be creating in order to make my server as a server which will be started off. So here what we have to do is everything, all the client server programming will be done under, you will be getting all the classes under java.net package. So this is a classification of all the socket classes being done in Java, right, which is this package, java.net package. Now you can see we'll be checking out where it is. Now here, let me make PyCache first. Syserror of error, get message. Yeah, after JDBC again we are back to Eclipse. JDBC is complete theory, kills. Fine. So here we have a server. Let us see how to make a server. Now, as we understood yesterday, I said we will be using server socket to create a server, right? Because whenever we want to create a server, what is important? If you remember the presentation yesterday, your IP and port is something which is very important to make your application a server, right? Because you have to make sure that you are actually exposing your IP. This was a server, your IP is there and port is there. Combination of these two we call it as a socket, right? Now by default, wherever you run your socket, right, server socket, it will take the local IP. You don't have to worry. I'm talking about server, right? But yes, you have to define a port for that, right? Because port is something, until unless you define a port, right, it can't take to which port the server has started. Now let me just open this up, the server part. Now let me use the server socket, right? You can see here server socket is something which is under your java.net. Okay, let me take it as server socket LOBJ server socket SS is equal to new server socket, and this contains, you can see there are so many things in here. If you want to give, you can also give your IP address if you want to make it, but yes, by default server will take whatever IP is in my local, whatever my machine's IP is there. This socket class have got efficiency to read my IP and make that IP as a server. But here, yes, you have to make your port, which port you want to listen to is important. Now here, let me take some port as maybe 8899, right? There is some port which I have taken, right? Which I feel that yes, this port will be free, and I'm going to use this. Now with this statement, right, you have created a server socket where you have taken the local IP and this port, which means the local IP and port will be made as a server, right? Now here, let me just say something like server started, right? There. So with this, which means here itself, if your port is not opening and if your IP have got some problem, but here itself you will be getting your exception and program ends here itself. This first line itself will make your server starts. You don't have to do something called start or something, right? And then whenever you have server socket, right? Server socket is something where you have made your IP and port as an server. Now, once you start your server, what is expected? Expected thing is that you will be getting some request from client, right? So now, whenever you are getting a request from client, which means you are actually getting his socket, right? You have to get his socket. Now, how can you get his socket? Again, you have something called socket class, right? Let me take it as LOBJ socket is equal to. Now, how can we accept his socket is, I have to go to my server socket dot, you have direct method called accept, right? So your program, the server program will be stuck here in the sense, until unless you get a socket, right? Your program will be waiting here. I mean, not stuck, it will be waiting here, right? Which means if a client gathers it, then it will work. So after this, let us say this is out, just say receive socket, right? Socket, or yeah, it is socket, or I can say client request. So I'm just giving these things so that you can understand that okay, where we are actually, right? And then let us, if you want to get the details of server socket, right, what you have received, let me just give some details here so I can trace this out, right? So here, whenever you accept socket, which means whoever is actually connecting to the server, that server's IP, everything will be recorded here. Now if you want to see that, let us say I want to see something called what is the port I have received, right? Maybe I can say socket dot, you have something called get port. You have many things anyways, right? Let me call it as some client port, right? Now in the same way, let me copy this up and let us say you want his IP, right? So for that you have something called get inet address. So IP here in socket is your inet address, which is internet address, right? And then let us get something called, yes, how much size of the data is received. Let us say data size, something, client data size, right? So for that you have something, there are many, but we just see some of three, get receive buffer size, right? So let us ping these things, right? So server started, received client request, the client port and everything, and the size of data. Now the main thing comes that what actually the data we have received from the client. The client will be sending some data, right? So that should be accepted by your server. Now for that we will be using some IO stream called data input. We have something called input stream, right? Data input stream. You can see it's a IO stream, right? Files IO. Now let me call it as LOBJ DIS, data input stream is equal to new Now here there is a beauty part, like it needs an input stream here. If you remember in our file classes, right? So whenever we used to write a program on buffer stream or object stream, we used to give input as a file stream. If you remember, we used to give something called file input stream, right? But here it is not the case. What we want to do, we want to read something which is we are actually getting from network, right? So during file classes, I've informed updated that we will be learning over the network reading part in our networking part, right? So this is what I was actually mentioning about, right? And here, what do we want is, we want to read something which is on the network we have received. So what is the thing which we have received from the network? We have received the socket first, which means through the socket I can read the data, right? Which means I can just say lobj socket here dot, you have something called, yes, you have direct thing which is get input stream. This get input stream will read the bytes whatever are there in that stream which are pertaining to the socket. Whenever I say socket, just remember that it's a combination of your IP and port. That's why I've printed your IP and port and the size of data, right? Now obviously whatever data you are getting into in a stream, right, will be your one of your byte form or something called UTF form. UTF is something that Unicode transfer form, right? Something. So let us say, let us fix something that client is writing some UTF and you are actually reading some UTF. Now let me say string, let us say lstr response is equal to, you have something called, you have taken data input stream, right? So let us go to data input stream dot, you have to, you can see here, if we sending direct line you can do, but yes, obviously you will be getting some UTF data, right? So let us say UTF data here, and yes, so if it is not convertible, then you have to convert, but rather just make it to make it more, let us convert this whole stuff whatever we are getting as a string, right? But anyways, it is giving as a string, it doesn't matter. Okay? Now this is a response, right? And the next step is nothing, just say sys out of response, or you say, yeah, response received, right? Just print a registry response, right? And now once you are done with this, what we have to do, you all guys remember, we have to close the things whatever we have open, right? We have to do everything in our something called finally, right? So we'll follow that, we'll not get out of that. So in order to use everything in finally, what you have to do, you have to make these things a scope of your finally. So let me define this here, make it null, and let me remove this. In the same way, let me make it my socket thing here is equal to null, right? Let me remove this socket thing, right? Now socket and these are okay, fine. And anyways, data input stream is completely combined with this, but doesn't matter. Let us even keep this here is equal to null. Now in our socket programming, right, you don't have to worry about everything, because if you close your server, everything else will be collapsed. That is how it works. Server socket will have hold of everything. Even if your server socket or number of sockets are actually there, right, it doesn't matter. What it will do, it will just keep them open, right? In that way, what we'll do, so in server thing, you can just go for one thing, which is check whether it is not null or not, which is server socket is not equal to null. If it is not equal to null, then yes, right? Because sometimes if it fails here to create a socket, obviously it will come here, give an error, and you have to check whether it is opened or not, right? So once it is done, just say dot close. Again, it has got the same thing, it is not close. Now, yes, okay, we have to handle our IO exception here, or some, yeah, IO exception, just say add close, right? Yeah, we throw this, not an issue, right? So that is how we are actually handling our socket here. If you want, you can also close your data input stream if you want. Yes, not equal to null, just say LOVJTS dot close, right? And if you want to close your socket, you can also do that. Socket not equal to null. Just say LOVJ socket dot, and say close, right? This possible. So that is how we create a simple server. Now you can see unless we accept something, here we are actually awaiting our thing. So now here we'll just say accept and just say server started and just say some waiting for client. Waiting for client, and unless it gets some client, it won't move to receive. Now that is what we have a server program where we have seen something on here. Fine. Now, yes, then obviously we have to go to the client program. Now, let's see project. Clean this up. Let us see whether there is no errors in this. Right? Now, here you can see. Let's see run this once. Okay. When I run this, you can see this. Can you see this? It says server started and waiting for client. So the whole will be here unless it gets some client request, right? It won't move. So what do you have to do? If you want to stop the server, you have to kill the process here, right? You have to kill the process and you have to move in with your server, right? That's what we have to do. You have to kill this process, right? Yeah. So that is how we create a server. The main things here is what you have to see here is your server socket, which is used to make a server where you will be giving only the port, where the IP will be registered with the server by default. And second thing is, once you start your server, which is if you define this, which means the server is started to accept the sockets. Now, so we'll try to accept the socket. Now, whatever you get is a form of a socket, which is nothing but you'll be getting something called from which IP and port you are actually reading up. As we are working on a local, you'll be getting the same IP. I'll be getting my actual IP now, not the local host, right? And I'll be getting my port. I'll be actually reading whenever I'm creating a client, I'll be giving the same port, but yes, whatever port I'm working on, I'll be reading with that from here, right? Where we say client receive, and yes, we'll be printing up something, and then now once your socket is ready, which means you know from which IP, right? You know from which board and from where you got, and then what we'll do, we'll try to accept the letter. That is what is we'll be using data input stream. Data input stream is a declarative pattern, right, which is used to read the data over the network. Now that is what we are doing over the network, in the sense we are actually taking a socket and just taking that input stream, and using this data input stream, we are actually reading the thing. There are so many things, but yes, this is something which is more optimized, where we are actually reading something in a byte manner or UTF manner, right? So we'll be reading this and we'll be printing this. So that is a server we have. Fine. So yes, this is what we have in server, and yeah. So let's wind up here, guys. So sorry that I just made a class late today. I had some drag on with some other class, right? And we'll meet up today and we'll try to create a client. And we create a client, and in the same class we'll see something like how to create a datagram program. Let me share this with you. We can just avoid this, right? Tomorrow I'll give you the client program so that you can actually measure up. So tomorrow we'll create client in some other Eclipse, right? Because why I was saying some other, right? So when you run this program, right, it will be waiting, which means I cannot run one more program. So that I'll be going into some other Eclipse, right? Maybe here I'll create one more, and when I run this, then this will act as a client and this will act as a server. That's how you will be connected. Right? Okay, then let me wind up here, right? We'll meet at the same time. So